Hello students, good morning. Welcome to the YouTube channel of Government College Chapra, and this is a channel that has been created for providing you e-content on your syllabus. Today's lecture has been recorded for BA Part 2nd especially and for all in general. The topic is Romanticism, definition and key themes. Although we have discussed about definition in the previous lectures, today's main objective is key themes of Romanticism. So let's start. First of all, let me repeat what is Romanticism, or maybe this definition is different from the last definitions. Romanticism was and is an international movement that swept Western Europe and Russia at the end of 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century. It expanded to North America beginning around 1830. So, it expanded to North America beginning around 1830 as a movement. Romanticism drew its inspiration and energy from various sources. The race for roots triggered by linguistic discoveries. Second, a growing sense that the creative possibilities inherent to the rigid formalism of Enlightenment philosophy and art had been exhausted. Growing fatigue with ruled by the few, and last, the resounding success of the French and American revolutions and such later popular wars for independence as those in Greece, Poland, and Spain. So these are the sources of Romanticism, these are the situations because of that Romanticism originates. The relationship among the linguistic nationalism and Romanticism. Here we would discuss what is the relationship among the linguistics, nationalism and Romanticism. Some of the earliest strings of the Romantic movement may be traced back to the mid 18th century interest in linguistics. So we can say from the point of linguistic Romanticism was started in the mid 18th century, not in the later half of the 18th century. Sir William Jones, 1746 to 1794, discovered that Sanskrit, Arabic, Greek, and Latin are more or less mutually unintelligible dialects descending from an original language. So, William Jones considers Sanskrit, Arabic, Greek, and Latin as dialects from a single one original language. Soon, other linguists discovered that nearly all of the dozens of languages spoken between India and Iceland are linguistically related, and that therefore an original ancestor language was once spoken by an original ancestor people. The theory came to be known as the Aryan hypothesis. So, who is the initiator of the theory of Aryan hypothesis? William Jones 1746 to 1794, and he considers Sanskrit, Arabic, Greek, and Latin as the dialects derived from original language. Other linguistics also discovered that nearly all of the thousands of languages are interconnected and they have been derived from a single original language and which is spread between India and Iceland. And this is the theory which is called Aryan hypothesis theory. This linguistic research soon became bound up in various nationalist movements of the 18th and 19th centuries. Europe, once united under the Holy Roman Empire, had been for some centuries devolving into a number of kingdoms and principalities held together more by common culture and vernacular language than by faith. So we can say the United Kingdom, or we can say Europe, once united under the Holy Empire, started to divide in various kingdoms and principalities based on linguistic, vernacular language and culture. Now come to the rage or rage for roots, and returning back to the ancient things. A rage for roots spread throughout Europe in the 19th century and in the late 18th century, and with it a keen interest in the myths and folklore of each language group's rural folk. So we can say people started to have the keen interest in the folklore and folk myths and folk tales, etc. German scholar Johann Gottfried Herder 1744 1803 coined the term folk spirit. The point to be noted here that the folk spirit was a term which was created John Gottfried von Herder 1744 to 1803. What is this term describes the essence of a people. Folk spirit means essence of a people. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, among others, collected popular fairy tales as a means of better defining the folk spirit of the German people. So people start to derive their themes from the folk tales, fairy tales, etc. Importance to Romanticism and Romantic poetry. Romanticism generally portrayed the products of the uncultivated popular imagination, product of uncultivated popular imagination as equal or even superior to those of the educated court poets and composers who had previously monopolized the attentions of scholars and connoisseurs. The basic idea was that the uncultivated were more natural and authentic than the educated, whose style was now considered artificial and affected. So this is the difference between neoclassical and romantic age poets. The basic idea was that the uncultivated were more natural and authentic than the educated, whose style was now considered artificial and affected. And Romanticism was an aesthetic movement During much of the 17th and 18th centuries, artists in old media, including literature, looked backward to the classical to Greco-Roman world. So this is the period where people start, where scholars started to look to backward to the classical Greco-Roman period, learned elegance, complexity, grandiosity, and adherence to the classical notions of unity, propriety, and harmony were valued over subjectivity, straightforwardness, and originality. As linguistic theories and nationalist longings begin to create interest in the authentic spirit of a people, artists begin to search for ways of expressing this quality both in their work and in their public personae. In addition, Romantic era artists begin to grow restless under the restrictions placed on creative expression by the vogue for artificiality and rigid formalism of the previous age. A new, more subjective and organic notion of aesthetic and philosophical value begin to emerge. So, a new and more subjective notion of aesthetic and philosophical value begin to emerge. Visualism is part of romantic movement. The new romantic taste favored relative simplicity into naturalness, and these were thought to flow most clearly and absolutely from the spontaneous opportunities of untutored rural people or from the meditative reveries of poets. Coleridge and Wordsworth's seminal preface to the lyrical ballades captured the essence of this movement in England, at least as it manifested itself in literature. According to the poets, they chose the subject of their best selling volume of poetry, rural folk, sometimes speaking in dialect, and self consciously made the narrator's voice and perceptions the orienting center of their poems. Interest in Shakespeare and medieval art and literature flourished at this time. So, an effect of the interest in discovering the true folk spirit of the English people, the Romantics made much a bit too much of Shakespeare's lack of college education, casting him as something of a rustic genius. Most importantly, he was an English genius, and thanks to the Romantics' high estimation of his importance, his reputation has been preeminent ever since. Gothicism, it is very important theme of Romantic movement. The interest in the medieval art and architecture was similarly a celebration of Western European creativity. The fairies, witches, demons, monsters of the medieval imagination reappear in a new genre, the Gothic novel. Coleridge's poetry frequently takes a Gothic turn, as for example in the rhyme of Ancient Mariner and Christabel. Emotionalism, a further reaction to the strict formality and cold rationality of Enlightenment era art, emotion, particularly Gothic horror, amazement, sexual tiltation, titillation, as well as the tender sentiments of affection, sorrow, and longing became the subject of Romantic period art of all kinds. It is this sometimes a sentimental feature of romantic poetry that is most foreign to modern tastes. Its tendency to allow to wallow in sorrow, to emphasize longing, and to position its narrators as occupying a place of lonely alienation occasionally and melodramatic. Romantic poetry and novels are characterized by sentimentality and characters enthrall to powerful emotions and in search of sublime experiences. Next theme was exoticism, a further means by which the romantic distanced themselves from the emphatic empiricism of enlightenment was to imagine parallel worlds and times through which to complete new ways of approaching relationships, religion, and politics. The Romantics often symbolized alternative modes of living and thinking, as well as the authenticity and naturalness of those living in pre civilized states with the images of foreign places. We see Spain, Italy, and particularly the Near East and North Africa as the setting for a further number of poems and novels of the period. This is enough for today. Remaining things we will discuss in the next lecture. So, thank you for having patience to listen me, and I hope this video would be very helpful to understand the romantic motives, the romantic themes. Thank you.